My son despised me. The truth cost billions. The rain in Seattle always felt different than the rain in prison. For the last 8 years since my release, I had built a small invisible life in a tiny apartment above a bakery. My name is Eleanor Vance, but to the world, and especially to the tabloids that destroyed me 15 years ago, I was the ice queen of Wall Street, the woman who embezzled millions from her husband's tech empire. I spent my days kneading dough and icing cakes, trying to wash the ghost of my old life off my hands with flour and sugar. I was content with the silence until the phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a lawyer from New York. Richard was dead. My ex-husband, the man I had loved since college, the man whose company I had built alongside him, had died of a sudden stroke. The funeral was in 2 days, and my presence was legally required for the reading of the will. I wanted to say no. I wanted to hang up and go back to my quiet, shame-filled existence. But then I thought of Daniel, my son. I hadn't seen him since the day the judge sentenced me. He was 25 now, likely taking over the company, and he probably hated me more than anyone on earth. Flying back to New York felt like travelling through time. The city hadn't changed, but I had. I wore a simple black dress, the only nice thing I owned, and kept my head down as I entered the cathedral. I stayed in the back shadows, watching the elite of the business world mourn a man they thought was a saint. And there, in the front row, was Daniel. He looked so much like Richard, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same sharp jawline. He stood stiffly, not shedding a tear. When the service ended, I tried to slip away, but our eyes locked. The look he gave me wasn't just anger, it was pure, unadulterated disgust. He didn't say a word, but his eyes screamed the accusation I had lived with for 15 years. Thief, liar, betrayer. I walked to the lawyer's office with a heavy heart, knowing I was walking into a lion's den. The conference room at the law firm was cold and sterile. Daniel sat at the head of the table, flanked by board members who whispered when I walked in. I took the chair furthest away. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man with a face like carved granite, cleared his throat and opened a leather portfolio. He began with the standard dispersals, charities, distant relatives, the housekeeper. Then he turned to Daniel. Daniel sat up straighter, adjusting his expensive cufflinks, ready to inherit the empire he believed was his birthright. Mr. Henderson read clearly, "To my son, Daniel Sterling, I leave the sum of $10, $1 for every year you have worked at Sterling Industries since graduation." The room went dead silent. "This is a joke," Daniel stammered, his voice trembling with rage. "This has to be a joke." Mr. Henderson didn't look up. He continued, "And to my ex-wife, Eleanor Vance, I leave the remainder of my estate, including 100% ownership of Sterling Industries, my real estate portfolio, and liquid assets totaling $200 million. The uproar was immediate. The board members shouted. Daniel stood up and slammed his fist on the table, screaming that a convicted felon couldn't own the company. I sat there, paralysed. I felt no triumph, only a confusing numbness. Mr. Henderson raised a hand to silence the room. "There is a letter," the lawyer said, his voice cutting through the noise. Richard insisted this be read before any legal challenges. He pulled out a thick envelope. It was addressed to Daniel. Mr. Henderson began to read Richard's words, and the voice from the grave changed everything. "My dear son," the letter began, "if you are hearing this, I am gone, and it is time for the only truth that matters. For 15 years, you have lived a life of privilege, believing your mother was a criminal who nearly destroyed us. You were wrong. In 2010, the company was bankrupt. I had gambled away our liquidity on illegal offshore investments. I was the one who embezzled the funds to cover my tracks. I was the one facing prison." I closed my eyes as the tears finally came. I remembered that night in the library, Richard on his knees begging me. He told me he wouldn't survive prison, that the scandal would ruin Daniel's future. I was the CFO, I could take the fall. I did it for my son. I pleaded guilty to crimes I didn't commit so my boy wouldn't grow up with a father behind bars. The lawyer continued reading, "Your mother Eleanor is the most honourable woman I have ever known. She sacrificed her freedom, her reputation, and her relationship with you to save me, and by extension to save your future. I let you hate her because I was a coward. I built my reputation on her silence. This inheritance is not a gift to her, Daniel. It is an apology she can never truly accept. The company is hers. It always should have been." When the reading finished, the silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Daniel turned to look at me. The disgust was gone, replaced by a look of utter devastation. He looked like a lost child. He collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. The board members looked at me with new eyes, not with judgment, but with fear. I stood up, feeling the weight of the years lifting off my shoulders. I walked over to Daniel. He didn't look up until I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Why?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me hate you?" I looked down at him, seeing the little boy I used to read bedtime stories to. "Because you loved him," I said softly. "And I wanted you to keep that hero. I could handle the hate. I couldn't handle seeing you broken." I didn't keep the money for myself. In the weeks that followed, I took control of Sterling Industries, not to rule it, but to clean it. I fired the board members who had been complicit in Richard's lies. I set up a foundation for women who had been wrongfully incarcerated, using the millions to give them legal aid and a second chance, the chance I never got. But the hardest work was with Daniel. He wanted to resign, to run away from the shame of his father's legacy. We met at a small park near the river, away from the cameras and the lawyers. He looked tired, stripped of his arrogance. "I don't deserve anything," he said, staring at the water. "I treated you like garbage for 15 years. You were a victim of the lie too," I told him. "But now you know the truth, and the truth comes with a price." I offered him a job. Not as a VP, not as an executive, but in the mailroom. "If you want this company one day," I said, "you will learn it from the ground up. You will learn integrity, not just how to make a profit. You will earn it, Daniel. Unlike your father, you will build something real." He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in his adult life. He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "Okay," he said, "I'll start Monday." It has been 6 months since Richard died. I still live in a modest apartment, though a bit nicer than the one above the bakery. I drive a simple car. The billions are in the bank, but they don't define me. Every morning I go to the office and watch my son sorting mail. learning the names of the janitors and the secretaries, learning what it means to be a human being before being a boss. We are rebuilding our relationship brick by brick, silence by silence. It isn't perfect. The years of lost time can never be fully recovered. But last Sunday, for the first time in 15 years, he called me Mom. And that one word was worth more than every penny of the inheritance. I lost my reputation to save my family, and I lost my freedom to protect a lie. But standing here now, watching my son become the man I always hoped he would be, I know I would do it all again. Because in the end, the truth didn't just set me free, it saved us both.